from America, from North and South America to Europe, Asia, and Africa, and also with resident staff based in Baku. So I also would like to express deep appreciation to hosts of this event, to other university chaired by Honorable Rector Dr. Hafiz Pashayev, to others executive education program for providing us this unique opportunity. Of course, I regret that this time we could not meet in person because of challenges and implications COVID-19 has brought to all of our lives, but I'm sure that we will have an opportunity to have physical interaction very soon. So the subject of my presentation, as Chinara Khanım mentioned, is internally displaced persons, protracted displacement in Azerbaijan, and long-awaited return. All previous sessions within others executive education program, I've been commencing with the questions which internally displaced persons have been posing to us, to me in particular, on a daily basis for the last 30 years. When are we going back to our native lands of origin? And why is international community still turning a blind eye towards restoration of our fundamental rights to return? And thanks God, we found answer to at least the first question. Azerbaijan's sensitivities to the case of the displaced population is clearly understandable. As a country which has been hosting in per capita terms one of the highest caseloads of the displaced population, refugees and IDPs alike, in the last 30 years' time. So immediately after the breakup of Soviet Union in the early 1990s and regaining its independence, Azerbaijan found itself in the midst of military conflict, aggression on the part of neighboring Armenia, which led to occupation of 20% of Azerbaijani's territory and led to displacement of nearly 1 million of people. About 250,000 ethnic Azerbaijanis, refugees from Armenia, 50,000 Meskheti Turks from Central Asia, plus around 700,000 people, internally displaced persons, who were forced to flee their homes from former oblasts of Nagorno-Karabakh and 7 adjacent districts. So, with a population of 7 million at that time, every 1 out of 7 persons, nationals, citizens of Azerbaijan, were considered to be either refugee or internally displaced persons. Azerbaijan has gained an enormous experience and knowledge base in dealing with a large-scale displacement over the past 3 decades. But at the beginning of crisis, with very limited resources, financial, economic resources, to cater for the needs, for the requirements of the displaced population, assistance on the part of international community, single, bilateral, and multilateral donors alike, like United Nations, were enormous. And our head of state has always been highlighting this, that in the absence of international humanitarian assistance, the country would have faced a real humanitarian catastrophe. And we are always thankful and grateful to all countries, to all international organizations which rendered us head of assistance the most critical period of time. Starting from 2001, Azerbaijani state has embarked on very ambitious construction and economic development program for internally displaced persons. 2 state programs have been adopted to this effect, and until now, a total of 115 new residential contemporary settlements have been erected across the country, more than 30 cities and districts, and we managed to relocate people, internally displaced persons who used to live in the most dire conditions, in hardest conditions, which felt much below minimum sanitary requirements of living, in tent camps, in rail wagons, in dugouts, in different types of administrative buildings, in unfinished buildings. And so far, we managed to relocate 315,000 people, IDPs and refugees, representing about 65,000 families, and provide them with improved housing. As a result of measures undertaken by Azerbaijani state over the past 3 decades, poverty level among IDPs dropped from 75 to 8%. A total amount of $7.7 billion worth has been allocated to cater for the needs of social needs of the displaced population, out of which about $1.4 billion were allocations made by different international humanitarian and development-oriented organizations, and the rest and the remaining part and the biggest part coming from state budget in terms of different types of allowances for IDPs, mostly food allowances, exemption from utilities, exemption from tuition fees, and from state oil fund. And these funds were primarily used for construction of new settlements. However, notwithstanding an exemplary care and attention rendered towards the displaced population by the national authorities, by the way, in line with UN guiding principles on internal displacement, which were adopted back in 1999, the only durable solution to the protracted displacement, and this was also stated in the reports made by UN special rapporteurs of human rights of IDPs, was linked to political settlement of the former Armenia-Azerbaijani Nagorno-Karabakh conflict that would have enabled internally displaced persons to exercise their basic fundamental rights as enshrined in international law, return to their permanent places of residence in safety, dignity, and on a voluntary basis. I would like to note that almost for 30 years, Armenia kept 20% of Azerbaijani territory under occupation, not complying with 1993 UN Security Council resolution, that's a supreme organ, in the world, demanding full, immediate, and unconditional withdrawal of all occupying forces from occupied Azerbaijani territories. Not only with UN Security Council, but also there were a number of different resolutions adopted to this effect by Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, by European Parliament, by Organization of Islamic Conference, and others. And as a result of ignorance on the part of Armenia of resolutions of international organizations, the problem of internal displacement has remained in our country unresolved for a long period of time. And here again, where we can see example of double or triple or even multiple standards on the part of international community, while in some cases it takes just few hours or few days for UN Security Council to enact implementation of its own resolutions, while in our case, 30 years after and still 4 resolutions of UN Security Council remained on paper. So only last year's glorious victory in a 44-day patriotic war, which started, by the way, as a counteroffensive in response to another yet provocation act committed by Armenian side by indiscriminately shelling at Azerbaijani territories and causing severe civilian casualties. So this glorious victory put an end to a 30-year-old standing conflict, and not only reinstated territorial integrity and national sovereignty of the Republic of Azerbaijan within its internationally recognized borders, but also created conditions conducive for safe, dignified, and voluntary return of thousands of our compatriots to their homeland. And by the way, during the last year war, about 84,000 people in Azerbaijan were forced to flee their homes, so got displaced. And a large number of people among them were those who suffered a tragedy of internal displacement for the second time in their lifespan. And Azerbaijani state took all the necessary measures to return these people to their homes, their residences, as soon as it became possible. At present, Azerbaijani state has an honorable task to ensure restoration, sustainable development, return and reintegration of the displaced population in their permanent places of residence. And currently, various security measures are being undertaken. Magnificent infrastructure projects are being implemented in the liberated areas. Smart city and smart village concepts will be given priority in reconstruction works in the liberated areas. And I'm pleased to note that the first wave of returnees will move back to their native lands of origin as early as beginning of next year. And just a few days ago, I was in a mission with UN staff in liberated areas and observed and really was impressed with the magnitude of and scale of work undertaken. And one village in Zengilan district, smart village consisting of 200 houses, is almost ready, and just last touches are being made, and in few months' time, the first returnees will move back. So great return of IDPs, along with reintegration of liberated areas into the national economy, has been defined as 1 out of 5 national priorities for socio-economic development of the country to be achieved by year 2030. And in this regard, I would like to underline that all liberated areas have been integrated into 2 economic zones, namely Karabakh and East Zangezur economic zone. So the term of Nagorno-Karabakh is obsolete, and it doesn't exist on geographical or political map of Azerbaijan. And this reality needs to be taken into consideration while making future references to the areas in question. It's also very important to note to create a new legislative basis with regard to return and reintegration. And State Committee for Affairs of Refugees and IDPs is working hard on drafting a new basis, new law on the status of repatriation and reintegration. At the same time, I would like to emphasize that areas which have been under occupation for a long time have been heavily contaminated with mines and other unexploded ordnance, to the extent that today, according to international experts, according to UN experts, this area is considered to be one of the most mine-contaminated areas on the earth. So far, Armenia has grossly violated fundamental human rights, especially right to life, by refusing to hand over mine maps in full. And even the maps which have been surrendered, they are accurate only to the extent of 25%. So literally, you have to dig every hectare from scratch. And massive landmines very negatively affect the exercise of inalienable right of hundreds of thousands of IDPs to return to their homes. And despite the rapid demining activities, number of civilian casualties as a result of regular mine explosions is increased. So from November 10 last year, when a trilateral statement was signed by leaders of Russian Federation, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, more than 160 Azerbaijanis lost their lives or got injured by mine explosions in liberated areas. And IDPs who have been looking forward to seeing their homeland for 30 years are also among them. State Committee for Affairs of Refugees and IDPs is currently conducting a survey, intention survey, and we know that the similar survey also was conducted by other universities with participation of academia. So, and preliminary findings of this survey shows that the vast majority of the displaced people are not only willing to return, and even at present, they have no idea whatsoever how liberated areas are going to look like, because everything actually is devastated, is looted, is razed to the ground. And Azerbaijani authorities, together with international experts, are working hard actually on evaluating the total amount of losses and damages incurred during the 30 years of occupation, and is going to raise claims against Armenia in the international courts. And by the way, the first such appeal was already made to United Nations International Court of Justice with request to endorse measures against Armenia, particularly in relation to mines, to mine maps. So Azerbaijani state will do everything possible to ensure smooth, safe, dignified, and voluntary return of IDPs in conformity with the requirements of international law, international humanitarian law. But still, we need pressure on the part of international community on Armenia with a request to speed up handover of land mine maps. Otherwise, this process could take significant amount of time, let alone human and financial resources. So this is in brief. I think it's just about 30 minutes time, and I will conclude my presentation here. And I would like to give sufficient time slot for questions and answers and for comments our esteemed participants may have, so that we could have it in a more efficient manner. I would like to thank you very much again for your kind attention, and I stand ready to answer questions which you may have to the best of my ability.